또 그런 계기를 보다 많은 분들께 하나 더 제공해 주고자 매일매일 신는 신발을 만들겠다고 한 것도 있어요. 조금 더 주변을 살펴보면은 나 스스로도 조금 더 환경 보호에 참여할 수 있는 일이나 물건들이 더 있지 않을까, 그렇게 찾아보시면 어떨까 싶습니다. 나는 다시 달릴 수 있게 만드는 그리너입니다.
아실리우스, 투를리우스, 카이킬리우스, 포필리우스, 페트로니우스, 아킬라루가 나소 칼바 렌토 파르메시스 마일리우.
The moment we wear it, our spirits lift. It helps us grow strong in body and in mind. As we wear it, we learn patience and respect. The belt system motivates students to strive harder and continue growing. This uniform shapes movement into grace and turns performance into something thrilling. Now, embraced around the world, Taekwondo shares our culture, philosophy, and values with pride and spirit. Though it may seem simple, this uniform holds your passion and your journey. It belongs to Taekwondo. Wear the extraordinary. Be with Taekwondo.
Torrential rains continue to batter the central region of the country, resulting in at least 4 fatalities and forcing residents to evacuate their homes. Additional heavy downpours are forecast nationwide through the end of the week. Foreign Minister nominee Cho Hyun said during his confirmation hearing on Thursday that a tariff could be sealed before the Trump administration's August 1st deadline. And the nominees for finance and industry ministers lay out their plans to reboot the country's economy and its future growth. In commemoration of the 77th anniversary of Constitution Day, the National Assembly has unveiled a monument symbolizing its commitment to upholding democratic principles. The occasion also reignites discussions on the need for constitutional reform. We begin with updates on the torrential downpours that are sweeping across the country. Without further ado, we connect with our Moon Hae-ryun on the line. Hae-ryun, give us the updates on the latest casualties and also damage caused by the heavy rain.
Right, Tommy. So relentless downpours are wreaking havoc across South Korea, leading to multiple fatalities, widespread evacuations, and growing concern in flood-prone regions. At least 4 people have died. In Osan, a wall collapsed onto a passing car, killing the driver, and in Seosan and Tangjin, 3 people died as roads and homes were flooded. A number of injuries, too, have been recorded as a result of landslides in Chungcheongnam-do province. The Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasures Headquarters reported that over 1,000 people have been evacuated from their homes in low-lying and landslide-prone areas as of this morning. But local governments in the central and southern regions of the country have been issuing evacuation advisories throughout the day. Overflowing rivers, for example, have led to residents in Gwangju evacuating their homes this evening. The rain has also led to major disruptions in travel, including train and flight services. Korea Railroad suspended all train operations between Gwangju's Hongjang Station and Mokpo Station on the Honam Line this afternoon, as well as regular train services across other major lines throughout the day. Several flights have been cancelled at Jeju Airport and several highways have been closed across the country. Authorities are urging drivers to use alternate routes and check traffic updates in advance.
Hae-ryun, this is a nationwide emergency. Now, what have been the responses from the government and the weather agency in light of this situation?
So as of 7:30 p.m., the Korea Meteorological Administration issued heavy rain warnings to 7 provinces and metropolitan cities and advisories to 14. And this is why the CDSCH saw fit to issue a level 3 emergency response earlier this evening for the first time in nearly 2 years. This is the highest level of disaster response in South Korea's national emergency system for heavy rain and means that all available manpower and equipment are mobilized as a result. Interior Ministry officials have said the top priority is minimizing casualties as up to 300 millimeters more rain could fall in the coming days. Local authorities have been advised to issue evacuation orders where needed, with the central government promising full support for resident protection and shelter costs. The Education Ministry has also activated its emergency task force in order to monitor the situation, with 667 schools nationwide choosing to close, shorten school hours, or transition to remote learning for the day.
Right, Hae-ryun, now you said that we could be looking at 300 millimeters of more rain. Could you expand on that and give us the outlook for tonight and also in the coming days?
That's right, Tommy. So heavy rainfall is expected tonight in the central and southern regions, with around 50 to 80 millimeters of rain expected to fall per hour. So this includes regions such as the Chungcheongdo provinces, which were hit particularly hard last night, as well as the Jeollado and Gyeongsangdo provinces, which have been seeing heavy rain this evening. So for some context, 50 to 80 millimeters of rain per hour is considered extremely dangerous, especially if it lasts more than a short while. Think of a torrential downpour that makes it nearly impossible to walk or drive through the streets. And as of now, it looks as though these areas can expect downpours at varying intensities until Saturday. The capital region is also expected to see some heavy rain until tomorrow morning before it eases up into something lighter starting tomorrow evening. And that's all I have on the rain for now, so back to you, Tammy.
All right, Hae-ryun, thank you for the coverage. And President Lee Jae Myung has also ordered an all-out response to the heavy rain. At a weekly meeting with his top aides on Thursday, the president called for safety inspections at high-risk areas, including underpasses, underground parking lots, and retaining walls.
이미 인명 피해가 발생하고 있는 것 같고 또 일부 침수 피해도 지금 보고되고 있습니다. 국민의 생명을 지키는 일에 작은 실수도 용납되지 않는다라는 점을 명확하게 말씀드립니다.
Stressing that the state's top duty is to protect its people. The president also urged swift investigations into recent workplace deaths, strict accountability for those responsible, and a stronger support for those falling through the cracks of the welfare system. And marking Constitution Day, he proposed reinstating as a public holiday, calling it a chance to reflect on the spirit of popular sovereignty. Now, the recent heavy rainfall and rapid flooding pose a heightened risk of unexpected accidents. Here's our Kim Bo-kyung with important safety guidelines.
With the monsoon season back, there have already been a series of vehicle flooding accidents. When one is trapped inside a submerged car, what would be the best survival tips? Trying to open the door right away might be hard due to the pressure difference. In this case, wait for the water inside the car to rise to the same level as the outside, as once the pressure equalizes, the door gets much easier to open. If the situation is too urgent, break the window using either an emergency hammer or the headrest of the seat. It is important to strike the upper part and the edges of the window so as not to get hurt by the broken glass. But what's best if water starts filling up inside?
The most important thing is to abandon the car and escape quickly if water starts rising inside the vehicle.
Heavy rain is often accompanied by lightning strikes, which can lead to serious injuries or even death. If thunder is heard within 30 seconds of a lightning flash, one needs to seek shelter immediately, as it indicates the lightning struck nearby. Wait at least 30 minutes after the last sound of thunder before going back outside. One needs to avoid holding long metal objects that can attract lightning and should not stay under trees or outdoor pavilions as they cannot block lightning. It is safer to stay inside a building or a car. High humidity during rainy season can significantly increase the risk of electrical leakage accidents. Thus, the Korea Electrical Safety Corporation recommends testing home circuit breakers in advance to ensure they function properly. Press the test button next to the breaker, and if the electricity cuts off when the button is pressed, it means it is working well. Avoiding electrical facilities in flooded areas is a must, and appliances should only be reconnected when they are completely dry. Lastly, unplugging devices at home could also be a way to prevent electrical hazards. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Day 4 of confirmation hearings for the Lee Jae Myung administration's inaugural cabinet picks took place today, where the nominees' visions and plans are largely centered on security, diplomacy, and the economy. Our Kim Jung-sil has the latest.
Foreign Minister nominee Cho Yeon expressed confidence that an agreement on U.S. tariffs could be reached before the August 1st deadline set by President Donald Trump. When asked at Thursday's confirmation hearing whether the negotiations could conclude in such a short time, Cho said this.
It seems possible, though it's hard to predict. We are putting in our utmost efforts, and from the U.S. perspective, South Korea is not only a very important ally, but also a key trading partner, so I believe they will prioritize negotiations with us.
Cho also highlighted the potential for both countries to turn the crisis into a win-win opportunity by leveraging South Korea's strengths. If appointed, he pledged to visit the U.S. as early as next week to help finalize the crucial negotiations. Moving to security, Cho was asked whether North Korea remains South Korea's primary enemy.
North Korea is an urgent and existential threat, but it is also a necessary partner in dialogue for peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula.
Cho emphasized the importance of close cooperation with the U.S. to ease tensions with North Korea and create opportunities for dialogue. He also outlined plans to strengthen trilateral cooperation with the U.S. and Japan while encouraging constructive roles from China and Russia. Meanwhile, confirmation hearings for key economic positions also took place. The finance minister nominee Koo Yoon-chol highlighted rising inflation, declining household incomes, and worsening external factors, stressing the decline in growth potential. He vowed to lead economic reforms to boost South Korea's future growth. Industry Minister nominee Kim Jong-wan outlined plans to boost exports and investments, emphasizing trade policies to strengthen the national interest, especially in response to U.S. tariffs, and expanding global trade networks through agreements and APEC summits. As hearings continue, focus remains on how nominees' policies will shape South Korea's security and economy. Kim Jung-sil, Arirang News.
President Lee Jae Myung has appointed Park Yong-man, a former chairman of the Korea Chamber of Commerce and Industry, to lead his special envoys to the U.S. A senior secretary for political affairs, Woo Sang-ho, told reporters Thursday that the three-member delegation will be made up of Park, along with ruling Democratic Party lawmakers Han Jun-ho and Kim Woo-young. Woo noted that the envoys are not being sent to address a specific issue, but rather to explain the changes in South Korea since President Lee took office. Now, their departure date has not yet been decided. This week, the president dispatched envoys to the EU headquarters in Brussels, France, the UK, and India. Today, July 17th, marks the 77th anniversary of Constitution Day here in South Korea. The National Assembly took the time to reflect on the true ideas of democracy and the power of Constitution. Our political correspondent, Shin Ha-young, tells us more.
The National Assembly of the Republic of Korea, the last bastion of democracy, are the words engraved on a monument unveiled on Thursday on the front lawn of the National Assembly, marking the 77th anniversary of the first proclamation of the Constitution. On the back, it commemorates the day the Assembly with the people blocked martial law troops, ending the decree's implementation and reaffirming its commitment to protect the people and strengthen democracy. Beneath the monument lies a National Assembly time capsule buried to mark the 77th Constitution Day, and it contains items that reflect the spirit of the times and will be opened 100 years later on July 17, 2125. The items include legislative and policy reports, notable bills, Dokdo-related publications, photos of the Assembly, a backup gavel, and messages from lawmakers and staff to future generations. South Korea's constitution was promulgated in 1948 based on open democracy. It was last revised in 1987 after decades of authoritarian rule. To celebrate the anniversary, the National Assembly held a special ceremony on Thursday where Speaker Woo Won-sik highlighted the power of the Constitution.
This is the first Constitution Day since the December 3rd martial law declaration. In Korea, the people protect the Constitution, and the Constitution protects them. That's why the Constitution is powerful, and Korea is strong.
Who also called for constitutional reform, saying this was needed to meet today's needs and to build a stronger democracy and improve people's lives. He floated the idea of a constitutional referendum alongside the presidential election back in April in order to address calls for decentralization of power following the martial law declaration, but withdrew this after a backlash.
We need to act before it's too late. Rather than a full reform, we should begin with small, gradual amendments that the National Assembly, government, and people can all agree on.
Posting on Facebook, President Lee Jae Myung called for a discussion on constitutional reform and urged the National Assembly to lead the process, pledging to work alongside the legislature to reflect the will of the people. Meanwhile, following several recently proposed bills to reinstate Constitution Day as a public holiday, attention is on whether it will become a national holiday again for the first time since 2007. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
An almost decade-long court battle against the executive chairman of Samsung Electronics has come to an end today, with the Supreme Court freeing Lee Jae Myung of all legal troubles. Our business correspondent Kim Do-yeon has more.
After nearly a decade of legal battles, Samsung Electronics executive chairman Lee Jae Myung is now officially free of all charges. On Thursday, South Korea's Supreme Court upheld a lower court ruling acquitting the Samsung chairman of fraud and market manipulation. The case entered on a controversial 2015 merger between Samsung C&T and Jae Industries, a deal that helped Lee cement control over Samsung Electronics despite not owning direct shares. The merger came as Lee was in the midst of inheriting leadership from his now late father, Lee Gon-hee. Prosecutors argued the merger unfairly favored Jae, where Lee was the largest shareholder. But the top court ruled there was insufficient evidence that the deal or the related accounting practices violated the law. Lee's legal woes began in 2016 with a bribery case linked to former impeached President Park Geun-hye. He served a total of 18 months in prison over the course of 4 years until 2021 and was barred from holding an official role at Samsung for 5 years following his release from prison. That ban was lifted early after a presidential pardon in 2022 by then-President Yoon Suk-yeol, paving the way for his formal return to Samsung leadership. Despite rejoining the company, Lee remained entangled in the ongoing merger case, making frequent court appearances. His legal team celebrated an appeals court acquittal in February 2025 and famously left this comment.
I hope this decision leads to the defendant returning and concentrating on their work.
Lee's freedom from legal issues comes as Samsung Electronics has recently faced mounting headwinds. Its operating profit for the second quarter was slashed in half year-on-year, dragged down by weakness in its key semiconductor business, which accounts for more than half of total profits. Pundits say the legal issues didn't help and kept the company as a whole from making risky and bold decisions.
But it's a little bit hard to get in the front line with legal issues going on. So I think that this gives a great signal both to the market and within Samsung, that Samsung will excel their AI and semiconductor strategies.
But now at least the man at the top is no longer looking over his shoulder, and that may mark a turning point for South Korea's biggest conglomerate. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
In other news, last month, South Korea's automobile exports marked a record high for any June, buoyed by regional gains and an EV rebound amid U.S. tariffs. Our Moon Ji-young tells us more.
South Korea's auto exports rose from a year earlier in June as a surge in shipments to Europe and Asia more than offset a decline in shipments to the U.S. caused by U.S. tariffs. According to the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy on Thursday, the country's auto exports came to $6.34 billion in June, up more than 2% year-on-year. This performance marks a record high for any June. By region, exports to the U.S. dropped for the fourth consecutive month, falling 16%. Conversely, European Union shipments surged more than 32%, and Asia also saw growth of more than 35%. These strong gains partly offset the decline in exports to the U.S. Notable growth was seen particularly in Germany and the Netherlands, where exports nearly doubled. The ministry attributed the growth to a base effect from sluggish exports in the same month last year, along with strong electric vehicle exports, among other factors. Outbound shipments of EVs saw their first growth in 16 months, rising more than 11% year-on-year. Exports of eco-friendly cars amounted to $2.2 billion, up over 18% from a year earlier. Regarding the outlook for the auto industry in the second half of this year, a ministry official said,
Measuring the outlook for the second half presents numerous uncertainties. Among potential downsides, should phenomena like a demand pull forward effect in the U.S. occur, the latter half of the year could face a slight downturn. Conversely, factors that could lead to an improvement include the resolution of global uncertainties stemming from tariff negotiations, or a further expansion of electric vehicle exports to Europe. These could, in fact, serve as positive influences.
Meanwhile, domestic production remained flat at over 353,000 vehicles. More than 72,000 eco-friendly cars were sold in South Korea in June, up 36% from a year earlier. Moon Ji-young, Arirang News.
South Korean cosmetics, widely known as K-beauty products, have been topping the to-buy list of foreign tourists visiting the country. And newly released figures underscore the growing global appeal of Korean beauty brands. For more, we turn to our correspondent Park Junan here in studio. Welcome, Junan.
Thanks for having me, Tommy.
So, Junan, Korean beauty products have been popular for quite some time, and I am also a loyal consumer of K-beauty brands, not because I'm Korean, but how popular really are they among foreigners?
Yeah, actually, just yesterday I went to Myeongdong, one of the most popular areas for foreign visitors. And there I could spot people from all over the world shopping for Korean beauty products. They told me that K-beauty products are well known in their countries, and they're happy to buy them at a lower price than they would at home. Let's take a listen to what tourists had to say about their K-beauty shopping experience in Korea.
I heard it by social medias and friends. We have a lot of channels in France that talk about this. So every French person wants to try because it works. So yeah. It's my first time. I never tried it, so I will try and see. We found out, well, through TV. I think it is well known that Korean beauty products are very good. And also friends and family who told us, oh, you're going to Korea, so can you bring me this or that, this product? Because they know that you are very famous for that.
Well, now we know how popular K-beauty products are around the world, but what makes them stand out among many other brands around the world? I mean, what makes them so special?
Right, you actually made a great point, Tommy. So when asked about what makes Korean cosmetics so special, one of the industry experts told me that they are technologically advanced for their price and are creative in product development. Let's take a listen.
Cosmetics companies in South Korea are so technologically advanced and cost-effective that last year we became the third largest exporter in the world. They're incredibly creative and great at coming up with new products, which is why they're receiving this kind of attention around the world.
Another claim made by the same industry expert is that cultural exposure and influence, such as through K-pop and K-drama figures, are attracting potential consumers to buy K-beauty products.
As K-dramas and K-pop have become more popular, people around the world are seeing more of Korean people's skin. I think that has contributed to a perception that Koreans have great skin because they use Korean cosmetics. Most of the products are now vegan, and there are also many functional patents behind them.
Well, they are affordable and they do really work great on our skin, I do have to say. Now, no wonder why K-beauty products hit a record high exports in the first half of 2025 this year. Tell us more about the figures.
Sure, Tammy. So the growth of South Korea's beauty product exports is surging at a dramatic pace, backed by record figures. According to the Ministry of Food and Drug Safety, South Korea exported cosmetics to 176 countries in the first half of 2025, reaching a total of $5.51 billion, a 14.8% increase from the same period last year. By country, China, the United States, and Japan were the top three importers, accounting for 48.1% of total exports. Although China saw an over 10% year-on-year decrease in export value, it still ranked as the #1 importer. The United States and Japan, however, saw remarkable increases of over 17% and 15% respectively. From 2012 to 2024, South Korea's cosmetics exports surged by over 850%, showing a strong annual year-on-year growth trend. And if the current pace continues, 2025 could mark yet another historic high, hopefully surpassing the $11 billion mark.
Well, hopes are high, and K-beauty is remarkably doing well, but I'm sure there's still room for improvement and even maybe concerns within the industry about future challenges. Are there any?
That's right, Tammy. Actually, there are some concerns. Well, although our cosmetics industry is performing very well, there are some concerns that remain, such as regulatory challenges, any possible increases in prices due to the 25% U.S. reciprocal tariffs. Now, let's take a listen to what a professor of the beauty industry had to say.
The government's R&D expenditure is too small compared to the increasing sales and exports of the cosmetics industry. All industries in Korea face difficulties without government support, and I think the industry can grow much more if it is supported.
Also, another industry expert raised concerns about factors that might increase product prices.
Concerns over tariffs essentially come down to pricing. Since each individual ingredient must undergo safety testing, the overall cost naturally increases. As a result, cosmetic prices inevitably rise. Rather than simply easing regulations, I believe we need to explore ways to simplify the safety assessment process while still ensuring product safety.
With rising demand from all over the world, K-beauty is now not just a trend, it's a new culture.
All right, Junna, thank you for that thorough coverage tonight. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you, Dami. I hope to see you soon.
It has been raining a lot, mainly in the central parts of the country and the Jeollado provinces since yesterday. Heavy rain warnings are in place in the Chungcheongdo, Jeollanam-do, Gyeongsang-nam-do provinces. Heavy rain advisories have been issued in most parts of the country. 150 millimeters or more of rain is expected in southern Gyeonggi-do province, Chungcheong-nam-do province, Daejeon and Sejong, and western Jeollabuk-do province, up to 120 or more in inland areas of Gangwon-do and Chungcheongbuk-do provinces, and 30 to 100 millimeters in the Seoul metropolitan area. Please be thoroughly prepared for torrential rain until Saturday. Tomorrow morning, Seoul will start off at 24 degrees Celsius, Chuncheon at 23 degrees. Daily highs will move up to 28 to 30 degrees across the country. This heavy rain is expected by the end of this week. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is all we have for tonight. I'm Kim Dami. For all of us here at Arirang, thanks for watching and good night.
도시는 세계와 연결되어 문화를 창조했고 새로운 것을 받아들였다.
자유,
융합,
국제성,
다양성, 포용,
개발.
과거와 현재, 미래가 어우르는 경주에서 신라의 정신과 에이펙 2025를 만납니다.
2025 celebrates the 80th anniversary of liberation. A place filled with culture, history, and diverse experiences. This is the Independence Hall of Korea. living the values of the independence movement. And together with the whole nation, we will make Korea great. The Independence Hall of Korea.
How to survive in Korea. Barbecue restaurants. Step 1. Taking care of your clothes. Put your jacket in the plastic bag. Seal it tight. If the stool flips open, store your clothes inside. Wearing light colors? Grab an apron. It's the best defense against oil splatter and smoke. Step 2. Bottomless side dishes. Basic side dishes at a barbecue restaurant. Eat, and eat as much as you want. Side dishes come with free refills. Oh, and if you don't see this sign, just ask, 사장님, 여기 밑반찬 좀 더 주세요. Simple, isn't it? Step 3. Grilling meat. There are various kinds of samgyeopsal in Korea. Place the meat on the grill. Turn it over when golden. And again when it looks done. Again and again and again. Step 4. Sam style. You aren't taking bites of sam like a taco, are you? In Korea, we have it in one bite. A pro tip here. Add only as much as you can handle in a bite. Gotta avoid awkward situations. Step 5. Enjoy the perks. After the meal, enjoy the perks offered as a Korean restaurant. Fabric refreshers get rid of the barbecue smell, while mint candies freshen your breath. Did you survive the barbecue restaurant? Hang on. Are you here with someone you want to impress? Then let's skip the garlic. Who knows what will happen?
Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mo-gen. The war in Ukraine has reached a dangerous plateau, stalled on the ground, but escalating in tone. A reported phone call between U.S. President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky raised the possibility of a potential strike on Moscow, shifting attention from diplomacy to deterrence. Now, over in Gaza, Israel's operations inside Rafah intensify even as ceasefire talks in Doha remain deadlocked over troop withdrawals and humanitarian control. With negotiations struck and civil talks mounting, international pressure is building, but without clear leverage. So tonight we ask, are these wars nearing resolution, or are we watching the normalization of endless conflict? For answers to this, we connect to Lee Jae Myung, Professor of International Studies at Kongsju National University. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
And also joining us online is Christophe Godin, Professor of Political Science at Kookmin University. Good to see you, Professor.
Good evening. Always a pleasure.
Now, let's start with Professor Lim. So with the Ukraine war in military stalemate and diplomatic channels barely functioning, we're seeing more bold rhetoric and riskier signaling from all sides. So from our starting point, how would you characterize the current phase of this war?
Well, any war cannot, be stopped that easily, of course, no. However, especially the war in Ukraine is really beyond the calculation and expectation. And it does, I think, creates a lot of concerns all around the world. And I feel like, President Trump, he also reveals, he already mentioned about his frustration or disappointment about the situation, and especially, which is interesting, but he especially mentioned, President Putin also, which means I feel like, again, the direction of wind is changing or has already changing. The reason why I'm mentioning like this way is, again, Mr. Trump, to President Trump, at least he was trying to be more neutral, or sometimes he was more actually critical to the Ukrainian side. We do vividly remember the talk, very conflictual conversation between the President Trump and President Zelensky in White House a few months ago. However, now again, President Trump reveals more explicitly mention about his own disappointment and frustration about the Russia / again the President Putin. Of course, that does not necessarily mean that, again, U.S.'s role as a mediator can really work, which means, again, they can really persuade the President Putin sooner or later. However, again, as I mentioned, I feel like, again, the direction of the wind has changed.
Right. The tone has definitely shifted, but the battlefield map hasn't yet. And that tension is really setting the stage for what will come next. Now, to Professor Godang, let's turn to that July 4th phone call. President Trump asked Zelensky whether Ukraine could strike Moscow if given U.S. long-range missiles, and Zelensky reportedly said yes to that. What did that exchange reveal about how each side is framing this war at the moment, and how might Moscow have received this?
Well, we can all agree that the actual recipient of this phone call was probably Vladimir Putin and not Volodymyr Zelensky. When President Trump called Zelensky, it was a way, as Professor Lim already mentioned, to voice his frustration and to send a message to Moscow that the US could get involved in this conflict. The issue, however, is that probably President Trump is bluffing, but a bluff needs to be sustained. Everybody understands that should Moscow be hit with American weapons, then in this case, obviously, it will make the US a co-belligerent in the conflict, and nobody wants that. What I think this means is that at first, when Trump came back to power, he thought that there was room for negotiation with Putin, and that the US and Russia, so to speak, could share the remains of Ukraine. What Trump is understanding slowly, I think, is that Putin's agenda goes much further. It is, of course, about protecting Russian interests, but it is also, in the bigger picture, about restoring the stature, the grandeur of Russia. I don't think, in short, that Putin will be happy until Zelensky is replaced with some pro-Russian leader. This is why this conflict is coming to a standstill, and a business-like approach like Trump's is doomed in the long run, I think.
Right. So this latest exchange didn't really play a good blow to the latest situation. Now, following a meeting with NATO, Trump has backed a model where European allies would arm Ukraine first, with the U.S. resupplying them later. Professor Lim, is this Trump re-legitimizing NATO, or a way of limiting direct U.S. exposure while retaining control?
As I mentioned earlier, again, I do see certain changes within the government, again, within the administration, Trump administration. And in addition to that, I think I need to mention, the specific leadership, again, the former Dutch Prime Minister, Mark Rutte. We watch the conversation between, now the picture is going on there, and then we watched this the friendly conversation between the President Trump and Secretary General of NATO, again the former Prime Minister of Netherlands, again Rutte. I feel like again the Mr. Rutte, he really created a really good relationship or more cooperative relationship with the President Trump. Again, the President Trump, of course, there can be many, pros and cons. However, many probably will agree that, again, that he is pretty much, dependent on the personal relationship. For example, we can remember the very friendly combination with the President Trump, again, between the President Trump and then, again, the Prime Minister Abe Shinzo of Japan back then. Again, they really showed their very strong friendship, and, their relationship has worked very well. So likewise, I feel like, again, this Mr. Rutte, Secretary General Rutte, his role was very big. I analyze like that way. Again, those personal relationship was pretty big thing, and I feel like again the President Trump was well persuaded again by Secretary General Rutte. So of course, personal relationship is not the only thing, and it might not be really the determining factor. But as long as President Trump is trying to change the gear toward again to Russia, definitely again the NATO is alliance, and alliance means again that they do have written words. Again, they do have a treaty, and treaty means again the legally binding. So according to the article of the NATO, those treaty, again, basically the U.S. has a responsibility at the end of the day, as long as they don't really break again the treaty, and then as long as they leave again the NATO framework. So again, I mentioned again the personal those relationship, again the very persuasive probably manner of the Secretary General Rutte. In addition to that, again the President Trump, he changed his probably mind, and in addition to that, again the NATO as an institution, again it does still have a power, I will say.
So, right. Now, let's move past a little bit individual diplomacy. Putin has now shown no sign of backing down despite military losses and mounting tariff threats. How much leverage does the West really have left, Professor Lim? And is Russia's war economy more resilient than what we've expected?
Yeah, sure, because Russia is such a big country. Again, it's the largest country in the world by its territorial size, and it's a very, very, very natural resource rich country, and not only just materially, physically as strong. Even though I'm not really a Russia studies expert, but Russian, their nationalism is very cohesive, I feel like, which means, again, even though the economy is not in a good form, of course, as you mentioned, it's better than we expected, but of course, it's getting worse and worse. So that is why I think President Putin, he mentioned that we need to reduce, again, the defense budget under probably 5%, because its current, the number is more than actually, as far as I remember, more than 6%. 1%. So he certainly he wants to probably adjust those, defense spending. He also wants to soothe again the Russian people's anxiety. However, that does not necessarily mean that again the Russian people already, how do you say, are very much against President Putin's policy, again, approach toward, again, the Ukraine, which means, again, they do have their collective national identity, which is, of course, very much strong and very much not that compatible with the current, again, the Ukrainian leadership. That is why, again, the Professor Godin, he already mentioned, again, as long as the leadership of Ukraine is it's not that compatible with the Russia's national identity, Putin might not be willing to stop the war, even though the economy is not in a good form, and even though it is still struggling. Having said that, my probably concluding point is, West, its leverage might be pretty much limited. However, over time, in the longer term, again, the Russia will be, losing many important strategic interests. For example, in the Azerbaijan-like country.
Mm-hmm. Right.
We'll see again. Certainly realignment is going on in not only just in the Europe, even in the Middle East as well. Mm-hmm.
Right. As the war lengthens, it gives a lot of losses to both sides, definitely. Now let's shift gears a little bit to the situation in Gaza. Israel's military strategy in Gaza and southern Lebanon continues to intensify despite growing international pressure. Professor Godin, do you see this as a calculated defiance of global norms or a sign of, Netanyahu losing strategic control?
Long story short, unfortunately, I think it is both. It is both because the story goes back a long way. Ever since the US has invaded Iraq in 2003 to get rid of Saddam Hussein, so that was against the UN Security Council at the time, what we have seen is finally the global world order shifting into pieces. So on the one hand, you're right, these international norms are collapsing slowly. And on the other hand, it is probably a calculation from Benjamin Netanyahu, because at the end of the day, let's not fool ourselves. The end goal of Netanyahu is the evacuation of Gaza. So on the one hand, you've got the UN that is not able to get their resolutions enacted. And on the other hand, you've got Netanyahu taking advantage of the situation to push for his agenda. And his agenda, at the end of the day, is about kicking Palestinians out of Palestine.
Right. So it's a very tough situation with very conflicting interests. Then, Professor Godin, do you see any realistic pathway towards ending the Gaza war at this point?
In fact, I think that from your perspective, it is very relevant to actually analyze the situation in Ukraine and the situation in Gaza within the same broadcast, because they're related. How are they related? Both conflicts, so far as we can see, have no foreseeable end. And the reason for that is that both parties, so Russia and the US on the one hand, the Hamas and Netanyahu's government on the other hand, have conflicting agenda, and nobody is ready to negotiate. So now, getting back to your question, what is this we can do? What can middle powers like Korea, like the EU, like France, Germany, etc., what is it they can do? The one thing we can do is, as much as possible, to push for more normalcy in international relations. What is it that Professor Lim explained before about Russia? She explained that, on the one hand, the impact of economic sanctions on Russia is limited. But on the other hand, this impact exists. It exists because, as Professor Lee mentioned, for instance, Putin spoke in favor of reducing the defense budget in Russia. And so now the question you could ask from an outsider's perspective is, if sanctions have been enacted against Russia, why couldn't they be enacted against Israel when Israel is breaching every possible international norm in Gaza? The problem with norms, at least democratic norms, is that they need to be implemented democratically. That is, putting everybody on an equal footing. That is, no double standards. The only thing I think European powers or Korea or other democratic nations can do for peace is to push for negotiations. And Netanyahu will not go back to peace talks without being forced to. And the only way to do so, I think, is with implementing economic sanctions. Again, if these sanctions have been enacted against Russia, I cannot think of a reasonable reason, a rational reason, why they could not against Israel.
Right. That's a very interesting point. So the sanctions, though the effects are quite limited, it does really exist. It does actually give a lot of influence into the country. So it should actually remain in place. Now let's step a little bit aside from both conflicts. So Professor Lim, has U.S. credibility as a peace broker diminished, strengthened, or simply shifted under the Trump's second term?
Well, I think many countries, many people around the world are very, again, frustrated in the current U.S., of course, leadership, because it's not as it used to be. Again, the United States, of course, still it is the largest economy. As President Putin highlighted several times during his conversation with the Secretary General of NATO, again, Mr. Rutte, of course, its military capability is still of course, the number one in the world. So even though it is still the most powerful country in the world, however, U.S. is that, again, the past leadership was also deeply related to its soft power as well. Again, its leadership, its emphasis on the norms or value. However, of course, the current President Trump's administration is pretty much actually very different from what we expected about, again, the U.S.'s position in the world. However, at the same time, these days, of course, a serious number of countries are trying to, again, to get the negotiation, get the deal done with the Washington, or, again, its attack on the Iranian, again, the nuclear facility. Those kind of, again, the cases paradoxically indicate to reflect, again, the U.S.'s power, I will say, even though it's that kind of normative leadership, ideological leadership has declined. However, that does not necessarily mean that U.S.'s power, material power and military power and its purchasing power and its technological power is still up there. So even though, Mr. Trump himself is already shows his frustrations about the deal or negotiations. However, at the same time, I can't deny the importance or the weight of the U.S. leadership in the global affair.
Right. So President Trump definitely has a lot of weight in this. And it's not just what the U.S. does, but how it's also perceived may also redefine the idea of them mediating the situation itself. Right, so we'll have to keep our close eyes on what developments will happen in the near future as well. But as for now, we'll have to conclude our discussion at this point. Thank you so much for your time and for your insights tonight, Professor Lim.
Thank you.
And Professor Godang, we appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Till then, stay informed and engaged.
Arirang TV is conducting an overseas TV viewer survey to provide you with a better global broadcast service.